He got the special training. It was this.
Okay, let us get started.
No more stories.
Okay. Kofayin Beis Amud Aleph, Rabbi Say. We're learning about the correct validation of a shtar, and in that context, on the third line, the Gemara says, Amar Lahu Rava bar Rav Shila lahano kasvei shtara akniyasa. So Rava bar Rav Shila gave instructions to scribes who were in charge of writing documents that were sales documents that were written up to represent a transfer of ownership of real estate. And he said to them, Ki kasvisu shtori akniyasa iyadisu yom dekanisu be kisvu, v'ilo kisvu yom dekayamisu be, ki hechi delo mischaze keshikra. He said to them, when you write up a bill of sale, make sure that you write one of two dates. You either write the date, if you know the date that the transaction took place. Many times the transaction will take place on Monday, and they won't get around to writing up the paper until, let's say, Thursday. So if you know the precise date of when the transaction took place in front of Eidim, so write that date in the shtar. Because after all, you want to make sure that the shtar has the power from the date that the transaction was made. But if you don't know the date when the actual transaction was made, then put in the present date, the date of the writing of the shtar, because otherwise you may look like you're making things up because you don't know the precise date. The Rashbam says that this is only true, this halacha, only when you're drawing up a bill of sale, in contrast to when you're drawing up a loan document. When you draw up a loan document, you can only put in the date of the drawing of the document, not the date of the actual loan. Because if a loan was made without documentation, then there's no protection for lukuchas. The idea here being is that you can't predate a shtar, right? We all know that because you're potentially committing fraud against people who will buy property from the debtor or from the seller after, if you predate the shtar, they may have purchased property before the shtar was enacted. Here, we're talking about a situation where the shtar is being written after the transaction took place. When it comes to sales, the buyers, future buyers are protected because everyone knows of a sale regardless of whether paper was drawn up or not, because witnesses are present and it's something that becomes a public spectacle that a transaction on real estate has occurred. And therefore, anyone who purchases property after the transaction will presumably know that the transaction has taken place, whether the paper is drawn up or not. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with drawing up the paper with the date of the transaction, because we presume that buyers will have known about it and will have properly protected and been forewarned. But when it comes to a loan document, if you were to date it going back to the date of the loan, it's not a public issue. That's not of the public interest. And therefore, it's altogether possible that buyers from the debtor would not know about that loan having taken place since no paper was drawn up, and therefore they're going to be left unprotected if you date the shtar back to the time of the loan. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Amar lahu Rav l'safrei v'chein Amar lahu Rav Huna l'safrei ki kaimisu b'shili kisvu b'shili v'yapol gav de misrin l'chumili b'hini ki kaimisu b'hini kisvu b'hini v'yapol gav de misrin l'chumili b'shili. Another instruction that Rav and Rav Huna gave to their scribes is that whenever you transcribe a transaction, if you're transcribing the transaction in a place where the transaction did not occur, let's say the transaction occurred in Minsk, and you're transcribing it in Pinsk, you have to write the place where you're writing down the transaction. Now the Rashbam says that's in addition to writing the place where the transaction took place. You should write both of them, but don't just write the place where the transaction took place and not write and leave out the place where the transcribing took place, because then again it looks like a fraudulent shtar, because if people trace back where the scribe was on that date, they'll be able to discover that he was never near Minsk, he was in Pinsk instead. Amar Rava, Haiman Dunakit Shtara Barmea Zuzi, Va'amar Shavyeni Ali Trey, b'nei chamshin chamshin, lo mashvinon luhu. Let's say a creditor holds a promissory note, and he says, this promissory note is for $100. I'm going to go to a sofer, ask the sofer to do me a favor. In the absence of the debtor, it's clear that this shtar is a promissory note, but what I'd like you to do is we'll tear up the $100 note and write me instead two $50 notes, and here's my witnesses, and so forth and so on. So we don't do that, unless the lova agrees to it, but we're not going to do it under normal circumstances. Even though it's still in total of $100 for the collection of the debt, but we're not going to rewrite a note to break it down to two $50s. Now, the reason why a creditor might want to do that is because it'll be much easier in the event that the debtor can only make a partial payment. If the debtor, let's say, wants to pay back the loan in two installments, if I have two promissory notes, that makes it much more convenient for both of us. You give me the $50, I tear up one of the notes, and I have one note remaining. So that's the reason why it could be in both of their interests, and there's no reason to write a receipt, no reason to rewrite anything. But we still don't do it. My taima, avdu rabbanan, milsa denichale lamalva venichale laloiva. So the Gemara says, because there's a very delicate system here in play whenever we draw up loan documents for a lender and a borrower. And the system, when I say it's delicate, it means that there's an accommodation and an inconvenience for both parties. And we don't want to skew that very delicate balance. So let's see. The advantage of having one note for 100 is advantageous to the malva. Why? Because the malva, now that he's only collected partial payment, will force the loiva to take a receipt that he's paid 50. And the malva will still hold on to the promissory note for 100. This puts pressure on the lova to pay back the balance as quickly as possible out of a fear that he's going to lose the receipt. And again, so that's the accommodation that's made for the malva. If you break up the note into two promissory notes and there's no need for the lova to hold on to any receipts, that incentive is now lost. And why is it in the lova's best interests to not write up two promissory notes instead of one? Because whenever a note is partially collected, it becomes what's called in halacha as pagum. It becomes tainted to a certain degree. This note, even though it says the face value of it is worth $100, it really isn't worth $100 because it's already been partially collected. And therefore, in such a circumstance where the debtor can demonstrate that it's already been partially collected, if a malva wishes to use it for extraction purposes, the Gemara in Ksuva says that he has to take a shavua. So that's the benefit of having a singular note worth 100 that's been partially paid, because it places more burden of evidence upon the malva to use it in the future. So that's why we're not going to do it, both for the benefit of the malva and for the benefit of the lova. Va'amar Rava, Haiman Dunakit Shrei Shtori B'nei Chamshin Chamshin V'amar Shavinu Ni'ali Chad Barmeya Lo Mashvinan Lei. And conversely, if let's say the malva has two promissory notes dated on the same day, both of them for $50, both of them for the same debtor, and he says, you know what, I'd like to consolidate this paper into one note for 100. We don't allow him to do that unless the lova agrees. Why? Because Ovid Rabbanan Milsa Denichale Lamalva Venichale Laloiva. And once again, the delicate balance has to be maintained to both accommodate the malva and the lova in some way. First of all, it's beneficial for the malva to not consolidate, because each promissory note can be collected individually, and if I collect $50 with one note, the second note is not in any way pogum, it's not tainted in any way, it's completely legitimate, and therefore I wouldn't have to take a shvua to collect with it. And it's also beneficial for the lova to have two notes instead of one, because this way the lova, when he pays off 50, is not under any pressure now to hold on to a receipt with that added incentive of having to pay back lest he lose the receipt. So this is if there's two, don't convert it to one, because you've now changed the dynamic in a way that could be potentially detrimental to either party. Amar Ravashi, Haiman denakit shtara bar meyazuzi, v'Amar shavini ni halichad bar chamshin lo mashvinan le. Now here's a third case Ravashi offers. He says, let's say a creditor comes to the scribe and he says, you see, I have this promissory note that's worth $100, but I've already collected 50 with it, so do me a favor and just we'll tear this one up and rewrite me a note for 50. So you might think, well, what's wrong with doing that? He's reducing his power. So the Gemara says, no, we don't do that. My taima, amrinan hai mifra pare, va'amar le havli shtaroi, va'amar le irkasli, v'chasiv le tavra, umapik le hai, va'amar le hai acharinahu. And the reason is because we're going to be a little suspicious in this case. In the event that the Malvin wants to commit fraud in the following situation, let's say he already collected back the debt for $100 completely from the Lova. So what is he still doing with the promissory note? He claims to the Lova that he lost the note. And he told the Lova, you know what, I'll just write you a receipt that you paid the full $100. And fine, so the Lova has now a receipt. The Malva will come to him and say, if we rewrite the note for 50, he'll come and say, well, this is clearly a different loan paper. Yes, it's true you have a receipt for paying me back the loan for 100, but I also separately loaned you another $50 because clearly this is a different loan because it's a different amount that's written in the shtar. And then the Malva will be able to commit fraud and collect another $50, and therefore we're not going to allow that. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Shnei achin echad ani ve'echad ashir v'hiniach lenavian merchatz ubeis habad. So the following situation, says the Mishnah, is where a man passes away and he leaves over property, let's say a bathhouse or an olive press for his children. He's got two sons. One is wealthy and one is poor. Now, the issue with a bathhouse and with an olive press is that these are items that if you're wealthy and you have a big plantation, you can benefit greatly from. If you have a large household full of servants, then a bathhouse is great. It can accommodate, let's say, 20, 30 people at a time, and everyone can take a bath and be clean and go back to work. If you have an olive press and you have lots of orchards of olive trees, so then an olive press is very valuable to you, so you can press your olives into olive oil. But let's say you're a poor person. You don't own servants. You don't have orchards. The only function that you could use for an olive press and a bathhouse is to rent it out, charge admission for people to use it, right? So this is where the controversy between the wealthy brother and the poor brother comes into play. The wealthy brothers may say, I want to use it for personal use. And the poor brother says, I want to rent it out to the public. So a son lischar haschar la'emtza, a son la'atzma arei ha'asher omer la'ani, kach lecha avadim v'yirchatzu b'merchatz, kach lecha zeisim, ubo va'asei b'veis habad. So the Mishnah says very simply, it depends on how the father used this property before he died. If the father used it for renting out to the public, so then the poor brother has a right to say, I want to continue that standard use. Our father was using it to rent it out, so I can demand that we rent it out and use it as a revenue generator for our estate, and we'll split the profits. If, however, the father used it for private use, because the father also had a large plantation with servants and orchards, so then the wealthy brother can rightfully say to the poor brother, buy yourself some servants, buy yourself some olive trees, and use it for personal use. That's the way I plan to use it, and you can't force me to open it up now to the public. Okay.
Are they going to share it? I don't understand. They're going to share it within the estate?
Yeah, because the estate, you can't split a bathhouse in half.
One can have one or the other.
One can buy out the other one. There are circumstances where one can buy out the other one. So the Rashbam talks about that, and that earlier in Bava Basra, there are certain situations where one can say to the other, good or good. You either buy me out or I'll buy you out. But here you were dealing with a circumstance that for whatever reason, that's not a practical solution. Okay, maybe the poor brother doesn't have the money, right? Next, Shnayim shayu bi'ir echas, Shem echad Yosef ben Shimon v'Shem echad Yosef ben Shimon. So now we have another totally new Mishnah, and that is you have two people in the same town with the exact identical name. They're both, for example, are both named Yosef ben Shimon. So ein yachol lahotzi shtar chov zeh al zeh, v'lo acher yochol lahotzi aleim shtar chov. So number one, if Yosef ben Shimon holds a promissory note that says Yosef ben Shimon owes him money, he can't produce this and coerce the other Yosef ben Shimon to pay him, because the other guy could say, I'm a different Yosef ben Shimon. In other words, even though you're holding the shtar that says that Yosef ben Shimon owes you money, maybe you owe yourself money. Maybe you generated a shtar that was in front of Eidim saying that you owe yourself money, because maybe that's what you decided to do. Yes.
If the names of their grandfathers were different,
we're gonna see that in just a moment. Yeah, we're gonna see that in just a moment. Very good. So neither of them can produce a promissory note to extract from each other, and furthermore, a third party cannot present a promissory note to either of them, because each one of them can deflect the creditor by saying, "You got the wrong Yosef ben Shimon. Go to the other guy. I'm not the debtor. The other Yosef ben Shimon is the debtor."
You said earlier that with a get that we had to call the other Yosef ben Shimon in and his wife.
Yosef ben Shimon.
When it comes to get, we said if there's two of them in the town, the other one has to come in when they're doing the get with his wife, both couples.
Is that what we said? I don't remember that anymore.
Okay,
but in any event, so again, financial law is going to be problematic as well, because you can't identify who the real debtor is. But nimtza le'echad ben shtarosav shtaro shel Yosef ben Shimon parua shtaro shneim pruin. And furthermore, let's say a third party has a document that is ratified by Beis Din that says the debt of Yosef ben Shimon has been paid. Each Yosef ben Shimon can now use that document as proof that they have paid off their debt to that individual. And therefore that individual, if they say, look, it says that he's been paid, even if he claims that the other Yosef ben Shimon was the one who paid back the debt, the other Yosef ben Shimon can say, no, I'm the one who paid you back the debt. So Kate said Yasser. So what do you do in case of this confusing same name situation? Yishaleshu. So as Mr. Woody correctly surmised, let's put down the names of the next generation, of the grandfathers in the shtar. So v'imhayu mishulashim. So what happens if the names are the same? They're both Yosef ben Shimon ben Yaakov, just by coincidence. So then what are you supposed to do? So then yichtavu siman. So another option is to write some kind of identifying sign that they're different. So let's say one is Yosef ben Shimon is tall and one is short. You write down tall Yosef ben Shimon, or you write short Yosef ben Shimon. Or v'imhayu misumanim, if their physical appearances are very similar, then yichtavu kohen. Then another option is to write that one of them is a kohen, or one of them is from such and such a shevet. The bottom line of the Mishnah is figure out how to identify each one uniquely and put that information in the shtar. The Gemara now says, "Hahu shtar denafak beveidina de Rav Huna de Havaksiv Bey ani ploni bar ploni lavisi mana mimcha." Now there's a promissory note that a guy produces. It's got the name of the debtor in it. It says, "I so and so owe you $1,000." Now it doesn't say the name of the creditor. It just says, "I Ploni ben Ploni owe you." It just has the word "you," $1,000. And the guy who's the professed creditor produces this in Beis Din. And the debtor is saying, I didn't borrow the money from you, I borrowed it from another guy. So the question is, does his possession of that document have validity or not? So Amar Rav Huna, Mimcha afilu mereish chalusa v'afilu mishmor malka. So as the Meforshim say, Rav Huna is contemplating this. He's not pronouncing judgment, but he's actually saying, well, how do I know that you're the real creditor? Maybe it fell out of the pocket of the Reish Galusa, the Exilarch, or the emperor of Persia. How do I know it fell from you? And he's just beginning to hear the case. And while this whole questioning is going on, so Amarle Rav Chisda l'Rabba puk ayin badel urta boy la Rav Huna minach. So Rav Chisda turns to Rabbi as they're listening to this unfold, and Rav Chisda says to Rabbi, you better research this carefully, because this afternoon or this evening, Rav Huna is going to ask you if you can prove the case one way or the other, whether this is a valid IOU. So nafak dok ba'ashkach. So he went ahead and he did his research, and he found a brisa that would support the following argument. What's the brisa? The Tanya get sheyeshel of edim ve'in bozman abashol omer im kasuv bo gerashtiya hayom kosher. So there's a brisa that says that if a woman produces a get and it has no date written in the get, but it just says the word hayom, today, you are hereby divorced today, so then Abba Shaul says that that's a valid get. And what do? We presume that whatever date she presents it to Beis Din for the collection of whatever she is taking back from the marriage with her is taken from today. And she can now use that as to force the husband to stop consuming the property that she brought into her marriage, but only from today. We assume that the get is dated from today. So Alma Hayom Hahu Yoma Denafik Bei Mashma. So we assume that the date that she produces it in Beis Din is what is meant by the word today, even though today is very generic. So Hachanami Mimcha Mehahu Gavr Denafik Mitu Seyadei Mashma. So let's say the same thing, that just like when a woman presents it to Beis Din, we assume that's what is meant by today. So too, when a person presents a note, we presume that the word "you" in the shtar is referring to the person who's producing the note. That's the same. It's by analogy. It should be the same thing. So the Gemara says, "Amar le Abaye v'dilma Abba Shol kaRebbi Elazar svirale da Amar Edi Mesira Karsi aval hacha lechush lenefila." So bias is not so fast. That's not necessarily a good analogy. Remember, we know that according to Rebbe Elazar that we saw yesterday in the Gemara in Gittin, the Mishnah Gittin says that he holds that really Eidim are not a vital component to a get. Because really the most important thing is that the transfer of paper occur in front of witnesses. But that witnesses be signatories in a shtar is not vital. We only do it to be able to, for convenience sake, so that we don't have to always run after the witnesses who were present. But they're not an integral part of the get itself. And the argument being is that just like according to Rebbe Elazar, witnesses are not an integral part of a shtar, the date is also not an integral part of the shtar. And therefore, maybe that's why Abba Shaul holds only in that case, because he holds like Rebbe Elazar, that a date is not important. But two parties in a transaction are vital. And it could be that Abba Shaul would agree that if one of the parties is not named explicitly in a promissory note, then it can't be used to collect, because we have to worry that it fell out of the pocket of the real creditor. And this guy is not the real creditor. So Amar Leila Nefila Lo Chayshina. So the response back to Abai is, we're not worried about something falling out of the pocket. And so Taka, we would still argue that an IOU that just says the word "you," we presume that that the person bearing that document is the real creditor. And how do I know that? That we're not worried that it fell from the guy's pocket. That nan shnaim shahayu be'ir echa shem echad Yosef ben Shimon v'shem acher Yosef ben Shimon einon yachol lahotzi shtar chov zeh al zeh v'lo acher yachol lahotzi alein shtar chov. So remember, what did our Mishnah say? Two guys in the same town whose name is identical, Yosef ben Shimon. They cannot try to extract money from each other using a promissory note that says Yosef ben Shimon. And furthermore, a third party cannot use a promissory note with Yosef ben Shimon on it to extract money from either of them, because if they are the accused debtor, each one can deflect and say, you got the wrong Yosef ben Shimon. Go to the other guy, he's your real debtor. The one case that our Mishnah did not address is, what if either one of the Yosef ben Shimons is bearing a note that has Yosef ben Shimon, and he wants to go to a third party to collect the debt. Not to be collected from, but to collect the debt from somebody else. That the Mishnah did not address. So we can infer from the Mishnah doesn't say that they don't have the power to do that. It sounds like from the Mishnah that as long as a Yosef ben Shimon is holding a promissory note, he can go to a third party and say, your name as the debtor is in this shtar, you must pay me the debt. Why can't the guy say to him, well, you're the wrong Yosef ben Shimon, you're not my creditor. So why don't we worry? Why can't we entertain the argument of the debtor to say, how do I know that you're the real Yosef ben Shimon? Maybe it fell out of the pocket of the other Yosef ben Shimon, and you're just masquerading as my creditor. But you're not the real Yosef ben Shimon, the other guy is the creditor. So why aren't we worried about that? So elalav shmamino lenefila lo chayshina. So what do you see from our Mishnah? The very fact that Yosef ben Shimon, either one of them, has a right to collect even though we don't know for sure that he's the real creditor because the name in the shtar does not definitively define him as the creditor, we still say that it's okay and we're not worried that he found it on the street and picked it up and is masquerading as the creditor. In the same vein, we're going to say the same argument over here. Our Mishnah proves the Shaila. Our Mishnah proves that as long as a person has an IOU, even though it doesn't have him by name in the note, he can use it to collect the debt, as long as the debtor's name is written in the shtar. So, va'abaya l'nefila dechad lo chayshinan, l'nefila derabim chayshinan. But Abaya doesn't like that argument. You know why? Because Abaya will tell you there's a big difference in the case of the Mishnah to a generic case. In the case of the Mishnah, the only reason why we allow either Yosef ben Shimon to use a note that has Yosef ben Shimon's name in it is because it's so far-fetched to fear that maybe the only other guy whose name is Yosef ben Shimon is the real creditor. It fell out of his pocket, and the only other Yosef ben Shimon in town found it and now wants to masquerade as the creditor. That's very far-fetched. It's not as far-fetched as a case where you have a town of 1,000 people and there's an IOU that just says the creditor is you. Doesn't mention him by name. So it could have fallen out of the pocket of any Yankel who's a creditor, and any other Yankel could have picked it up and used it as a promissory note. That's instead of just the slim chances of Yosef ben Shimon finding it on the street from another Yosef ben Shimon, here's the possibility that any person out of the 1,000 people in the town could have found a promissory note and use it to collect on a debt. And that's why Abaya says the two cases are not comparable, and he would hold that if it says IOU without the name of the creditor, you cannot collect with it. So ve'elahad detanya kishem she'in motzin shtar chov ze al ze kachin motzin al acherim b'may kamiflagi. So the wait a minute, says the Gemara. Okay, Abaya, you hold that if it doesn't have a name written in it, you can't use it to collect. But you agree with our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah says that if it says Yosef ben Shimon in it, then we assume that the bearer of the note is the Yosef ben Shimon who's the original creditor, and we're not worried that maybe it's the other Yosef ben Shimon. Let me ask you a question. Why then is there a brisa that seems to disagree with our Mishnah? There's a brisa that says that not only can a creditor not collect from either Yosef ben Shimon, but both Yosef ben Shimons cannot use a note that has their name in it to collect the debt, because the debtor can always deflect them and say, you're not the real creditor, the other Yosef ben Shimon is the creditor. Why is that? Even you, Abaya, would agree that that's too far-fetched to entertain as a possibility. Why does the Brisa argue with our Mishnah? So we have a machlokus between the Mishnah and the Brisa. The Mishnah maintains that either Yosef ben Shimon can use a promissory note to collect as long as it has the name Yosef ben Shimon in it. And the Brisa says they cannot, because the debtor can always deflect either one. But why does the Brisa hold that way? What's the svara of the Brisa? So the Gemara answer is ba'osios niknos b'mesira kamiflagi. The machlokus is, how is a piece of paper transacted? So Tana didan savar osios niknos b'mesira, but Tana bara savar ein osios niknos b'mesira. The Gemara's argument is like this. Remember, we've talked about this before. How does a transaction of a note, of a shtar, take place? We had said before that there's one opinion that says that simply physically handing it over from party A to party B creates a transfer of ownership of that note. And so therefore, whatever power A previously had through that note, B automatically assumes with the physical taking possession of that note. And so therefore, our Tana is of the opinion as follows. Even if the original Yosef ben Shimon A was the real creditor, and Yosef ben Shimon B is the fellow who acquired the note afterwards because maybe Yosef ben Shimon A gave him the note, that's okay. Because if Yosef ben Shimon A gave Yosef ben Shimon B the note, so then there was an immediate transfer of ownership. Yosef ben Shimon B now becomes the creditor because he's taken possession of the promissory note, and he's the legal owner of that debt, and he can collect the debt from the debtor. That's what our Tana holds. In other words, even if you're going to assume that there was a transfer made from Yosef ben Shimon A to Yosef ben Shimon B, then Yosef ben Shimon B is the legal creditor, and there's no problem. But the Brisa says like this. It's not that we're worried that A lost it and B picked it up. we're worried that A transferred it over to B, but without an actual kinyan, just by giving it over, we assume that Yosef ben Shimon A did not relinquish his rights of collection of the debt, but merely gave it to Yosef ben Shimon B to hold for safekeeping. So the debtor can, when he's presented with the shtar from Yosef ben Shimon B, and he says, "You're not my creditor, the other Yosef ben Shimon is my creditor," he can deflect him. And then Yosef ben Shimon A will have to take repossession of the note in order to be able to collect from the debtor. That's simply what the Bryce is basically saying. It's saying that the debtor can deflect the presenter of the note for the simple reason that there's no, he can say, maybe just because you're holding the note doesn't mean that you're the true owner of the note. That's the difference, because according to the Brisa, you have to actually make a kinyan in addition to the transfer of paper in order for the bearer of the paper to be considered the owner. So that's the first suggested answer. V'iboy is saying, I'll give you another suggestion as to what the machlokas between the Mishnah and the Brisa is. Dekule alma osios niknos b'mesira v'acha b'tzarach lahavi raya kamiflagi. Tana didan savar ein tzarach lahavi raya, v'tana bara savar tzarach lahavi raya. He says another possibility is that both the Mishnah and the Brisa hold that the mere transfer of paper constitutes a transfer of ownership of the debt. However, if let's say my name is Ruvain, and I hold a piece of paper that says that Shimon is the creditor, I can't just present that, according to one opinion, to collect the debt, because the debtor could say to me, it says that I owe Shimon money. What are you doing with the money, with the paper, Ruvain? Ruvain can't say Shimon just gave me the paper or sold me the paper. He's got to bring evidence for that. So that's why the debtor can deflect him, according to the Brisa. The itmar osios niknos b'misira b'aya omer tzarach lahavi raya v'rava omer eno tzarach lahavi raya. And that's the machlokas, that according to Abaya, even though you can transfer the ownership of a promissory note by simply physically giving it from party A to party B, but if the name of A is written in the note as the creditor, B has to bring proof that he's acquired it legally from A before he can use it to collect with. That's all the Bryce is saying. Our Mishnah says that no, the very fact that he's holding the note makes him the duly legal owner of the note, and all he can say is that I got the note as a gift or as a sale from party A, and that's why I'm authorized to collect the debt even though my name's not in it. And therefore our Mishnah holds that even if you tell me that I'm not the real Yosef ben Shimon because the other Yosef ben Shimon is your creditor, but I got the note from him and I don't have to prove to you that he gave it to me. So mimon afshach, you owe me the money either because I'm the original creditor or because I got the note as a gift from Yosef ben Shimon A. And this is where we'll hold it for today. Have a wonderful day.